have the
lateral sulcus.
No, that's lateral sulcus, or some people call it
fissure.
A fissure. This would be the longitudinal fissure. And it's always kind of hard to be sure where you are, but
Central sulcus.
Central sulcus. Yeah. I think it's probably back here, because usually back further. And then in front of it would be the
precentral gyrus
and
postcentral
gyrus. And the precentral gyrus has what in it? Which cells are there that are really important?
For motor
and neural cells.
Purkinje cells.
No. Not
Purkinje cells?
No, something I told you it would be on the test for sure.
Pyramidal? No.
Pyramidal cells.
Yeah.
Pyramidal.
The beginning of the pyramidal tracts. Put that away, please. So that's the first neuron in a 2 or 3 neuron pathway is going to go to your skeletal muscles. So it's for voluntary movement. Very important. Guaranteed, pyramidal cells will be on your test. Pyramidal tracts will be on your test. Guaranteed, okay?
Pyramidal.
Okay. So, and the size of the area in the brain, because it's been mapped, is proportional to the number of motor units. So for your hand, you have a lot of control, so you have very small motor units, you have a whole bunch of them there. Okay. And then post-central gyrus would be your
sensory.
Somatosensory. Okay, not just any sensory, but the one, you know, where your receptors are under your skin or in your skin, that kind. So like pain, itch, tickle, pressure, touch. And again, the area in your brain is not proportional to the size of the area, but the number of receptors you have for the area. So again, your fingers have a lot of receptors. You feel a lot of things with your fingers. It has a large part of your brain. Okay. What lobe would this be? And what does that have to do with? Vision. Okay. And deep in here is what lobe of the brain?
Insula.
Which has to do with gustatory. Okay. And what do we find in the temporal lobe? What senses?
Hearing.
Hearing, okay, and no, not shit.
That's in a different part of the brain.
Let me look it up.
What was the question?
What's found in the temporal lobe?
Temporal lobe?
What's left?
Oh.
It's not olfactory, so
This is the higher portion. This is the vision.
not vision.
Actually, olfactory is here.
Olfactory in the temporal lobe?
Smelling. Smell.
And what's in the, and gustatory would be
Insula.
Okay.
The
And
temporal lobe also has something to do with vision. Is it finding vision?
Well, yeah.
Temporal.
Coming from here, there are pathways leading to the parietal lobe and the temporal lobe that have to do with vision, which I'll be covering a little bit, but I'm not sure I'm just going to go into it. That's a little more cutting edge.
So like triangle.
And what do we have here?
Olfactory bulb.
Olfactory bulb and tract. Is
tract.
that cranial nerve number 1?
Yes.
And
No,
one.
it's not. What? No. Okay, what do we have for temporal lobe? Olfactory. Yeah. Now remember, the smell goes directly to the temporal lobe. It does not go through the thalamus.
Thalamus.
Most sensory information goes through the thalamus on its way to the cortex. Smell goes right to the temporal lobe and right to the limbic system. Okay, so it can later be sent on to other parts of the brain for interpretation, other stuff like that. But it is. But this is not cranial nerve number 1, because cranial nerve number 1 is the one that's going up through those olfactory foramina in your nose, and synapses with the olfactory bulbs. So that's, you know, so this is the bulb. These are tracts because it's considered to be in the brain now. What would this be then?
Optic tract.
Chiasm.
Chiasm. I can't see.
Chiasm?
Now that's the optic chiasm.
That's a chiasm.
Optic
Tract.
Optic
Nope.
nerve.
Optic nerve. Before it's in the brain, okay, don't get too fancy. Before it gets to the brain, it's called optic nerve. After the optic chiasm, it's called optic tracts because it's considered to be in the brain.
Okay.
Optic chiasm is where, what happens there?
Switches.
Yeah.
What switches?
No, that's where it meets.
The medial fiber, the parts coming from the medial part of the eyes cross there.
Cross.
The lateral stay lateral. The medial are the
crossing.
ones that cross, okay? So, and of course, nearby we have the, not shown here, pituitary.
Oh,
Pituitary.
It sits under the peduncle, right?
No.
The infundibulum.
And then some
So, no,
That's
the
the
infundibulum goes to the pituitary. And that, if there's a tumor there, it can push on that optic chiasm. And then you lose your vision from the medial parts of your eye, which means you lost your peripheral vision because the light in the medial part of your eyes is coming from the pituitary. Okay, what is this?
Corpus
Corpus
callosum.
callosum.
And corpus callosum is what kind of white matter?
Commission tract.
Commissure. And then we also have an anterior and a posterior someplace. Okay. What's this?
Septum pellucidum.
Septum pellucidum. Oops.
Septum pellucidum.
Which divides what?
On the ventricles of the brain.
It's a lateral and a third
So
ventricle.
on either side would be a lateral ventricle. What's this?
That's the fornix.
Fornix, which does what?
Some kind of border. I don't.
It connects together the parts of the limbic system.
That big
Okay.
system.
Now, corpus callosum is a commissural tract, and we also have anterior and posterior commissures. What other kinds of white matter do we have? Association neurons, which are on the same side of the brain hemisphere, connecting together gyra, and also
What types of white matter?
what kind of, yeah,
Or
right.
types of tracks.
They're tracks.
So,
So we have things connecting the two halves. We have things on the same side,
which connect the jury.
but what is going up and down? Those are called projection tracks.
Projection.
So what would be the pyramidal tracks? What type?
Projection tracks.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, I think that sounded too much like a guess. Yes, that's true. This is screwed up here. There should not be a hole here. This should be going straight across, and what would be here?
Thalamus.
Thalamus,
Third
okay?
ventricle.
And the it's part of the walls for the third ventricle. So the third ventricle is just a slit-like part between the two halves of thalamus. And sometimes connecting the two halves of thalamus is the intermediate mass, or interthalamic adhesion,
Interthalamic
which is it's not a corpus callosum type thing. There's no axons connecting the two. A lot of people don't have it, okay? And what would this be? Hypothalamus. Now what happens in the thalamus?
It's the gateway of the brain.
Gateway to the brain. So what's coming through it? Not everything, especially sensory information. It's the last stop, and from there we, send it on to different parts of the brain, including the postcentral gyrus, the occipital lobe. So a lot of sensory information. Most sensory information coming in has 3 neurons in the pathway. I'm sneaking ahead a little bit because the hardest part is coming up, and that's the pathways. Most people, I don't have any problem with pathways, but a lot of people do, so I'm going to sneak a little in if that's all right with you.
Yes.
So coming in, the first neuron comes in from the peripheral nervous system, brings it into the spinal cord. Sometimes it synapses immediately with the second neuron. Sometimes it goes up the back of the spinal cord and synapses in the medulla. It's the second neuron that always crosses to the other side and goes up, like if it's synapse in the medulla, it goes up for the medulla to the thalamus. Okay, so that second neuron goes there, and then from the thalamus it goes wherever. Now, as it goes through the thalamus, a lot of stuff is screened out, or some stuff is amplified. So the thalamus actually has some control over what gets through.
So Melissa doesn't have a thalamus.
Because I have no filter.
Sometimes I wonder if some people don't have it. This person didn't have much of a filter, probably.
There's a giant hole there.
What are these?
Your
That's the corpora quadrigemini.
Corpora quadrigemina.
4 sisters.
Does it have the cortex?
Superior, inferior.
Superior colliculus
Colliculus.
and inferior colliculus, but there's only half of it showing here because it's cut in half. Corpora quadrigemina.
Or tectal.
It's tectal plate.
Yeah.
So the superior colliculus has to do with
That's for the vision reflex center.
visual reflexes, and the inferior
Auditory.
auditory reflexes. So the guy we saw that had blind sight, remember he could tell motion?
Oh,
The idea
the
is
clicker guy?
that-
The
No, that's a different
sonographer?
person.
Oh.
The one we saw in the movie. Remember he had blind sight? He was blind, but he couldn't see on the right side of the field, but he could tell motion
yeah.
without seeing
He was
it.
on a computer playing Pong Thursday.
No, he was not. Oh, shut up. Shut up, shut up,
You
shut
can
up.
only see the square shot.
Don't listen to him, okay? He'll lead you down the wrong path, okay?
I'm gonna keep my A, dude.
He was playing Pong.
Yeah, don't listen to him. So he couldn't see on the right side, but he could tell about movement on the right side. So the idea is there was more than one pathway.
Because of the sound.
And the pathway that was still intact with him, because he got brain damage, was the one through the superior colliculi. So that's why they didn't say that in the movie exactly, but that's what they inferred. So through the superior colliculi, he could tell about movement. Sort of like within, I think they were talking about The little animals, the little, what do you call it?
Chinchilla?
Hmm?
Little animal?
Look at those little lizards or whatever, okay, that they could tell movement, okay. Okay. And other things like there's a bright light, you might turn to, or something like that, or turn away. And hearing reflexes, if you hear sound, you know, you might turn
Or you
towards
see
it.
an animal when you're driving.
Yeah, something like that, yeah, okay. Let's see, what else do we have here? And what are these cute little bumps here? Mammillary bodies. And they're part of what part of the brain?
Mesencephalon.
Nope.
Midbrain?
Nope. Someone said diencephalon, didn't they?
Diencephalon.
Okay. What part of the diencephalon?
That's the epithalamus.
No, the epithalamus is way back there. These are over here.
Hypothalamus.
You got your parts all mixed up. You got to study some more.
Is it not part of the limbic system?
Yeah, kind of.
No, it's not.
But what?
I'm just guessing at this one.
What? We have three major parts of the diencephalon. We have the thalamus, epithalamus, and hypothalamus. This is part of the
Hypothalamus.
hypothalamus. Remember, mammillary region, smell reflexes, etc. Okay.
Hypo.
Okay. Now,
Because
this
they're
is
so
the
hypo.
midbrain up here. Okay. This is the midbrain around in here. Oh, it's kind of screwed up looking, but on the anterior and a bit lateral surface here, which is hard to reach on this one, we have what?
Anterior surface of the midbrain.
That's the
This is important.
is that anterior commissure?
No, it's the.
Let me poke you in the eye.
No.
I feel some tension over
No.
I don't want to
There
correct.
is some tension inside me.
She didn't have her Wheaties today, huh?
You need to go work out, Dr. Dixon.
Hi there. How are
Go
you?
do
You're late. You should have gone to Pilates, you know?
Go do 21s over there on the side.
Okay. Midbrain.
We're going to practice deep breathing.
Anterior lateral part of the midbrain. I can show. If someone got me a model, yes. Cerebral peduncles.
Ah, dang it, you freaking peduncles.
Peduncle means little feet.
Which is in between.
And it's part of the pyramidal tracts. As they pass through the midbrain, they're called the cerebral peduncles. That's important for you to know. Also, as they pass the corpus striatum, remember that? The corpus striatum is the place where you have the basal nuclei, and that area is called the corpus striatum because it means striped body. And passing through that area, also we have some white matter going both directions. They also pass through that area. It's called the internal capsule. And then you can't see him down in the pond. What is this? No, it's not pedunculum. Olive. No, that's on the side.
That's the pyramids.
Pyramids.
And then the side is the
What are they
olives.
part of?
That's
Medulla
part.
oblongata, right? No.
Okay, medulla oblongata, but what tracts are they part of?
Just tracks again, man.
Tracks are
The pyramids are part of which tracts? The pyramidal tracts.
That's a
We were trying to think of your other things you were.
I think I need to study more of the pyramidal.
Why didn't I concur?
I have, did I mention pyramidal is important?
So, pyramidal.
Okay, pyramidal.
Yeah, it's pyramidal for me. I'm
Okay,
Bobby.
pyramidal.
Hobby.
Either, okay.
Yeah, self.
So pyramidal tracts are important because that's what happens as in the pyramids here, in this area of the medulla oblongata. Something very important happens there in those pyramidal tracts.
Does that descend,
Like
which is the cassation?
Yeah, decussation of the pyramid. That means some of them cross over to the other side.
Does the crossover?
Which ones cross to the other side? Let me remember I mentioned most of them cross to the other side here. Because remember, the right side controls the left side of the brain, left side of the body, left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. Which ones cross here? To what area of the body?